The doctor counted 37 separate wounds from bullets, bayonets, and shrapnel. His jaw was shattered, his right lung had collapsed, and he was still alive. This is Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez. The date is May 2nd, 1968. You are deep in the jungles of Vietnam, near the Cambodian border. A 12-man Special Forces team is trapped. Radio calls paint a grim picture. They are surrounded. An entire North Vietnamese Army battalion, nearly 1,000 men, is closing in for the kill. Benavidez hears the frantic calls over the radio at his forward operating base. He is not part of this mission. He is supposed to be resting. But he grabs a medical bag, a single Bowie knife, and jumps onto the nearest rescue helicopter. And here's where the story begins to defy logic. He is a passenger on a flight directly into a storm of enemy fire. The helicopter pilot can't land. The ground is too hot. So Benavidez makes a decision. He tells the pilot to get close, and he jumps. He runs nearly 75 meters through open terrain, under constant machine gun fire. He reaches the battered team. He finds 4 dead, the rest wounded. He begins passing out ammunition. He applies field dressings. He takes control. Then a bullet tears into his right leg. He ignores it. He directs the team's fire and calls in tactical airstrikes. At one point, he gets so close to the action that shrapnel from an American bomb rips into his back and the back of his head. Still, he fights. Think about what that means. You can barely stand. You are bleeding from multiple wounds, and your work has just begun. An enemy soldier appears from the jungle. He lunges at Benavidez with a bayonet. The blade slices into his left arm. Benavidez pulls the blade out, grabs his own knife, and kills the soldier in brutal hand-to-hand combat. But not before the soldier smashes his rifle butt into Benavidez's face, fracturing his jaw. Now he can't even speak. The official reports don't mention this next part. He uses the dead soldier's rifle, continuing to direct the defense. He gathers the classified documents from the fallen team leader. He ensures nothing is left for the enemy. Finally, a second helicopter arrives. He begins dragging the wounded and the dead across the battlefield. He makes trip after trip. Another bullet hits him in the abdomen. Another piece of shrapnel from a grenade finds his back. As he pulls a final soldier onto the chopper, he is shot again. The pilot is killed. The helicopter crashes, and he is still alive. After 6 hours of this, a final helicopter lands. Benavidez, barely conscious, makes one last push to get the survivors aboard. Back at the base, they lay him with the other dead. A doctor confirms it. No signs of life. He begins to zip up the body bag. But just before he turns away, he hears a sound that should have been impossible. That impossible sound was a cough. A deep, guttural cough. The doctor, stunned, unzips the bag. He looks closer. Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez, declared dead moments before, spits in his face. Think about that defiance. You have endured 6 hours of unimaginable combat. You have been shot, stabbed, and blown up. And your first act back among the living is to spit. This single act of defiance saved his life. You see, the doctor was about to tag him as deceased. That cough, that single, raw human sound, made him reconsider. It forced him to look deeper. The official reports from that day, May 2nd, 1968, detail the medical team's astonishment. They found 7 major bullet wounds, 43 pieces of shrapnel embedded in his body. His jaw was broken. His left arm was nearly severed. His right lung had collapsed. And yet, he lived. This data was not widely disseminated at the time. It was an anomaly. And here's where it gets interesting. How could one man sustain such catastrophic injuries and still function? Still fight? Still lead? The human body, under extreme duress, can achieve incredible feats. But this was beyond belief. What drives a person to such extremes? What fuels that kind of resilience? Roy Benavidez was no stranger to hardship. He was an orphan, raised by his Mexican-American grandfather. He dropped out of school to pick crops in Texas. He joined the Army in 1955. His journey was one of constant struggle. You might think this was a one-time surge of adrenaline, a momentary burst of superhuman strength. But Benavidez's life was a testament to enduring grit. In 1965, he stepped on a landmine in Vietnam. The doctors told him he would never walk again. They said he would never return to combat. They offered him a medical discharge. He refused. He spent months in recovery, secretly training at night. He would crawl out of bed, push through agonizing pain, and teach himself to walk again. He defied every medical prognosis. He returned to Vietnam in 1968, just months before this incident. No one in the medical community expected him to recover, let alone to return to active duty. Yet he did. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a story of choice. Every moment, every breath was a conscious decision to push forward, to fight, to live. The military doctors cataloged his injuries with clinical precision. Each bullet, each shrapnel fragment. They documented the damage to his muscles, his bones, his organs. But they couldn't quantify the will that kept him breathing. They couldn't measure the spirit that refused to surrender. They stitched him back together, piece by piece. You can imagine the pain, the sheer agony of recovery. Yet he persevered. The Pentagon initially awarded him the Distinguished Service Cross, a high honor, but many felt it was not enough. They felt it did not fully capture the scope of his actions. They felt it understated the raw courage displayed that day. The true narrative of what happened on May 2, 1968, remained largely untold for years. Why? The official reports downplayed the severity of the engagement. They understated the enemy numbers. They painted a picture of a difficult but manageable situation. But you know the truth. You know he faced hundreds. What do you think happened to the Distinguished Service Cross? Why was it not enough to recognize the man who cheated death so many times in a single day? The Distinguished Service Cross, while a high honor, did not fully capture the scope of Benavidez's actions. The official narrative struggled to contain the sheer scale of his bravery. You might wonder, how could such an extraordinary display of courage be downplayed? The truth is often inconvenient. The initial reports of the May 2, 1968 engagement were incomplete. They stated a smaller enemy force, a less chaotic battlefield. But the reality was a maelstrom. The 1968 incident was far more brutal than initially acknowledged. The Pentagon's official records, declassified years later, reveal a deliberate effort to control the narrative. They feared the psychological impact of such a devastating encounter. Think about what that means for the soldiers fighting there. For years, the full extent of Benavidez's heroism remained obscured. The initial Distinguished Service Cross acknowledged his bravery, but it omitted critical details. It did not mention the hand-to-hand combat. It did not fully describe the multiple extractions under fire. These omissions were not accidental. They were part of a larger strategy, a strategy to manage public perception. Many in the Special Forces community, however, knew the real story. They saw the injuries. They heard the eyewitness accounts. They understood the true cost of that day. This disparity between official accounts and reality fueled a quiet campaign, a campaign to elevate Benavidez's recognition. You see, the military has a rigorous system for awards. Each tier signifies a different level of valor. The Medal of Honor is the highest. It demands actions of extreme heroism, above and beyond the call of duty, at the risk of one's life. Benavidez's actions on May 2nd clearly met this criteria. But the initial paperwork was flawed. Critical details were missing. Key witnesses were not thoroughly interviewed. This oversight meant his case for the Medal of Honor was initially rejected. Imagine that. You survive the impossible, and the system fails to recognize it. It's a bitter pill to swallow. For years, this injustice gnawed at those who knew the truth. They remembered the chaos, the endless enemy fire, the sight of Benavides bleeding but unyielding. They refused to let his sacrifice be forgotten. Former members of the 5th Special Forces Group spearheaded the effort. They gathered new testimonies. They meticulously reconstructed the events of that day. It was a painstaking process. More than 10 years passed. 10 years where a hero's full story remained untold. But the tenacity of his comrades paid off. New evidence emerged. The accounts of the surviving Special Forces team members were finally heard in full. They spoke of the overwhelming enemy numbers. They described Benavides's relentless courage, his unwavering focus, his absolute refusal to leave anyone behind. These detailed testimonies painted a picture of heroism far exceeding the initial reports. They revealed the true scope of the battle, the sheer weight of the odds against him, the fact that he single-handedly saved at least 8 lives. This revised evidence was undeniable. It forced a re-evaluation. The Army reviewed the case. They re-examined every bullet hole, every shrapnel scar, every agonizing detail. They saw the impossible, and they finally acknowledged it. On February 24, 1981, President Ronald Reagan awarded Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavides the Medal of Honor, 13 years after the battle. Think about the irony. A man declared dead, then awarded a lesser medal, finally received the nation's highest honor. It makes you question how many other stories remain untold. How many acts of courage are lost to bureaucratic oversight or deliberate obfuscation? Benavides himself often spoke of the men he fought alongside. He never claimed sole glory. He always emphasized the team. But his actions that day stood alone. They transcended the ordinary. They redefined courage. And here's where it gets even more poignant. He received his medal in a public ceremony, a moment of national recognition. Yet the deep scars, both visible and invisible, remained. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a rectification, a public acknowledgement of a truth that had been suppressed. And it wasn't just about Benavides. It was about recognizing the true cost of war, the extreme sacrifices made by ordinary people under extraordinary circumstances. The full story of May 2, 1968, finally emerged. A cascade of violence met by an unstoppable will. And the system, however, eventually corrected itself. But one must ask, what took so long? And what other truths are still waiting to be uncovered? Correction, the long-delayed Medal of Honor, still leaves an unsettling question. What other truths, what other sacrifices remain buried beneath layers of official reports and forgotten memories? For Roy Benavides, the medal was a recognition, but it was not an ending. The battle for him continued. You see, the physical scars were just the beginning. The 37 wounds, the 43 shrapnel fragments, the shattered jaw, these were external markers of an internal war. Think about the nightmares, the constant echoes of May 2, 1968. What do you think that does to a person? The noise of the choppers, the screams, the relentless gunfire. He lived with that soundscape for decades. This data, the human cost of such extreme heroism, is rarely catalogued in military records. They document the bullets, but not the ghosts. Benavides often spoke of his comrades who didn't return. He carried their stories, their faces. He carried the weight of the men he dragged, dead or alive, across that bloody field. The psychological toll of his actions that day was immense. He suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Flashbacks were frequent. Sleep was elusive. He struggled with chronic pain from his extensive injuries. These were the hidden wounds, the ones not seen by a medal ceremony. Here's the part nobody talks about. The hero, the recipient of the nation's highest honor, still had to fight for basic medical care. For a man who gave so much, the system was not always kind. He often found himself battling bureaucracy, trying to prove the connection between his injuries and his service. It's a cruel irony. Imagine surviving such an ordeal, only to be questioned about your pain. You might think that after such recognition, life would become easier. But for Benavidez, the fight shifted. From jungle combat to fighting for his family, for his health, he became a tireless advocate for veterans. He spoke passionately about the needs of those who served. He traveled across the country, sharing his story, not for glory, but to remind people of the true price of freedom. He did not shy away from the brutal details. He described the blood, the fear, the smell of burning jungle. He wanted people to understand, to feel. He wanted them to know the men he fought with, the ones who did not come home. His voice, though often strained from his injuries, carried immense power. He spoke to thousands of schoolchildren. He told them about courage, about duty, about never giving up. He told them that even when all hope seems lost, you must keep fighting. This message resonated deeply. It wasn't just a war story, it was a life lesson. The stories he shared, the specific details of his fight, brought the abstract concept of heroism into sharp focus. He made it personal. You could hear the conviction in his voice. You could see the pain in his eyes. He showed you the scars, both visible and invisible. He proved that true strength isn't just about surviving, it's about living with what you survived. He passed away on November 29, 1998, at the age of 63. His body, ravaged by his wounds, finally gave out. But his spirit, his message, lived on. His legacy is not just the Medal of Honor. It's the countless lives he touched through his unwavering commitment to truth and service. The untold stories, the quiet struggles after the cameras have gone, these are the real echoes of battle. You must ask yourself, are we truly listening to them? Perhaps we are not listening in the right way. We expect the echoes of battle to be loud, gunfire, explosions. But the true resonance of a life like Roy Benavidez's is found in the quiet that follows, in the things built, not destroyed. Look here. This is the USNS Benavidez, a cargo ship launched in 1999. And this is the USS Benavidez, a guided missile destroyer christened in 2019. His name, etched in steel, now sails across the very oceans he crossed to go to war. Think about that. The name of a man who fought so desperately on land now stands for protection at sea. The ship's official motto is simple. 3 words: Tango, Mike, Mike. This is not some obscure military code. It's a phrase Benavidez himself used, that others may live. It was the reason he jumped from the helicopter, the reason he ran 75 meters through open fire, the reason he endured 37 wounds, that others may live. And here's where the echo becomes a voice. In El Paso, Texas, there is the Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez Elementary School. In San Antonio, a technical high school bears his name. Hundreds of children walk those halls every day. They learn his story. They learn about the man who was told he would never walk again, and then ran into a storm of bullets. But do they understand the cost? The official story is one of heroism, the Medal of Honor, the ship, the school, a clean narrative. But you know the truth. You know about the shattered jaw, the spitting defiance, the years of pain, the quiet battles fought long after the war was over. This is the paradox of honoring a hero like Benavidez. We build monuments to a moment of extreme violence. We name schools after an act of brutal, necessary combat. We try to sanitize the blood and the mud, to make it palatable for history books. But the lesson isn't in the sanitized version. The lesson is in the grit. It's in the fact that he was an orphan who picked crops, a man who refused to be broken by a landmine, a soldier who fought a system that was to recognize his sacrifice. His story isn't about being superhuman. It's about being profoundly, stubbornly human. The real question isn't whether we remember his name. It's whether we understand what it stands for. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking action despite it. That resilience is built in the quiet moments of struggle, long before the final test. Roy Benavidez faced an enemy he could see, 1,000 men in a jungle. The objective was clear: survive, save your men. But you live in a different world. The challenges are not always so clear. The enemies are not always visible. His story gives us a benchmark for human endurance, a measure of what one person can withstand for a cause greater than himself. It sets a standard.